tātou, e ngā uri katoa, o ua wā tuara, wai taunamu, Warakauri. Greetings and salutations to you all who have come both from the north, south and across the Chatham Islands.
The karanga came to Omeka to hold a hui for Takiwa, and we've done that, and we've set up a process to ensure that your voice is heard today. This is the first for us to bring our people in through video conferencing, through Zoom. One of the driving reasons that people are here is because Hui Whakapuma for 2 years called for membership from out of Ngā Tōpito Ewha. That hasn't happened for 2 years. This will be the way that those will be held, because you can't afford to be travelling back and forth from your rohe to Rātana Pā for those hui. So we can start to make this sort of technology work. We'll easily feed it into all of our structural work that we're doing.
E aroa tiki a koe e te taki. Koe nei te noho o ngā pau. Puta noho te mochi. Kei te hara mai ki te Omeka, kei te noho ki te kororo ati e pāna ki ngā take o tēnei hai. Thank you for allowing us to come here to have our hui. This is not an Omeka hui. This is a hui of concern of all the Māori hui from throughout the mochi. And that your door was open to us, ko nei te take. That's what we mean to Omeka, for having your door open for us to come here and hui.
In July 1925, Te Hāhi Rātana was registered. Ko ngā pōtoro rehita, ko ngā āpōtoro wairua, ko ngā ākonga me ngā āwhina. So from the two kawinata to the Pau Te Hāhi, he established the national mandate and the foundation for the future of the Hui Whakapuma that we all have been a part of in its history. In 1926, to form the Komiti Takiwa under the Hāhi. Throughout the whole country, Komiti Takiwa and Komiti Whaiti were then established. The hui of the Pau Te Hāhi were called Hui Hinota. They were known as the Synod, following the traditions of our whanaunga from the Mihingare and our whanaunga from the Katorika. Then when he made his visit in 1928 into the north at Kaikohe, the change from Hui Hinota to Hui Whakapūmau i te kororiatanga o iho ngā mano. By 1930-31, as we know, ko oti tāte arepa e tūnei te temepara. And the New Year's 1930-31, te arepa passes away, fulfilling the ture wairua. 1932, following the year, Tiri Kātene goes into Parliament, Te Omeka passes away, the ture tangata. By 1934, when Hamuera was to pass away, the dad did a review. Between 1934 and 1936, he appointed Tokoru Rātana as the perehitini o te kotahitanga, and he appointed Patu Koroneho as the tumuaki o te Hāhi. Then he formed Te Runanga o te Hāhi in 1936. From 1936, he did another review to 1938. By 1938 and 1939, after the opening of the Manuo, he would make his last final review of the tikanga and the kotahitanga and the Hāhi. He had formed, through the Hui Whakapuma and the Komiti Takiwa and the Komiti Whaiti and the Komiti Marae, because the Komiti Marae were made up of our whanaungas as well throughout the maraes. So we had to work together on the Komiti Maraes, and the Komiti Whaitis were for the morehu, in terms of fundraising, in terms of looking after our Pau Te Hāhi and our morehu. He formed the Komiti Matua Ture Wairua Ture Tangata, that was made up of the four quarter. He tried to put in place a number of entities and bodies that didn't come to fruition, namely the Rātana Māori Morehu League Council, which was in the culmination of all these bodies with regards to the Rātana Trust Board that was set up. So I'll conclude by saying that from that point onwards, the dad made a last final visit, 2 final visits to Te Rereo Kapuni in 1939, in January and February. There he dedicated his last 1939 kawinata. And in this kawinata were all of the administrators that had signed and all the members of all ngā pou and under the structure that the dad had left behind. Administrators of the time, Ihaka Te Tai, returned back to the north, Peter Moko returned back to Rotorua, and many of the administrators that were with the dad, they left. By the 1950s to the 60s, there was a need for the Hui Whakapumo to bring order back again, because the orders and the standing orders and how they used to run the huis used to be on the marae. When I spoke to my father, he told me that Korobani Wharerangi, Henare Erimana, and Whaimatua Anaru, and others of the kaumatu of the time saw that there was a need for a constitution. In 1994, when Rani Eraratana took the mantle and tried to attempt with great earnest to have a review of the constitution at the time, tēnā koe mita, tēnā koutou, tō koutou maia. Thank you for making that attempt to have the review of the Constitution. My father said to me before he passed away, tears rolling down his eyes, my son, he aha, ko hara hau ki mua ki ai ho ngā mano. I went, why's that, Dad? He said, because the Constitution that we are operating on today is not the original Constitution of the dad, of the Hui Whakapumo. That is why for the last 40 years or 50 years or longer, we've been in lockjaw. I know today there are some issues around the Constitution. I'm not going to go there. All my role is to trace the history down to today and the Hui Whakapumo as it stands. But if we are to go back to the kupua te matua, the Hui Whakapumo originated at Kaikohe, at the Kotahitanga Marae, when he declared, he whakapumo I te kororiatanga o ihoa o ngā mano. So the original mandate of Hui Whakapumo from 1928 lies with you. A pōtoro rehita, a pōtoro wairua, a konga, a whina, as the original pillars of the tikanga. Kei ngā runanga, e ngā pōtoro takiwa, kei a koutou hoki, te tokotoko o te kōrero, e tūwei a te arepa, la o ko te omeka. Hoi no, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, mā ngai tautoko ai.
Two peka in this maramatanga that we have to uphold. And that is the ture wairua and the ture tangata. And the deal with the political area, which you eventually have to get involved with, is another committee deal with that particular part of it. You talk about the Treaty of Waitangi, all the issues that deal with ture tangata, we are not keeping these in balance. These two, ture wairua and ture tangata. The kaupapa of Te Omeka still has to be written. There was a text made, but the annihilation of the members and the kaupapa that were put forward by Piruwiri Tua, Māori actually defeated themselves in that. There is still room for us to get our act together in this. Hui Whakapumo, I think that needs to continue. Whatever status we want to put on it, led by Pounahahi, because it has to be done. At the moment, we're being held to ransom, and the strength really comes from the people that you have here. To initiate this meeting so we can proceed in developing some form of Hui Whakapumo status, takiwa, somewhere around our po, and make a recommendation from here.
What's really important is to actually acknowledge the fact that the Hui Whakapumo is a decision-making body before it's a policy-making body. It sits in a role where it's there to decide on matters to do with the church and decide on matters to do with the ture tangata. If the committee Hahi Matua's role is to implement, then it sits under the Hui Hakapuma, it doesn't sit above it. Its purpose is to serve what the Hui Hakapuma does in the organisation. Koina tōku nei kōrero, tēnā koutou.
The problem with our committee matua is that we have too much ture tangata people in there. And if you want change in our committee matua, I believe that's where the change is. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā tātou, mai māua o te takiwa o Karanga ki te tonga. Last Sunday, we sat as a takiwa to discuss, diagnose, deliberate over some of the conversations that have been going on out in the open space. We're here basically to reaffirm that we understand ka noho tuakana te committee te hui whakapumau, ka noho teina te committee Hahi Matua. The governance bits and pieces sits with hui whakapumau, and the role of committee Hahi Matua is to carry out and operate and fulfill those decisions that are made at that space. Yes, we do have some questions around the current design of the membership of committee Hahi Matua. We do have questions around the role and the relationship that committee marae has with committee Hahi Matua, or with the Hahi. We do question those who are representing committee marae on our committee Hahi Matua. We do understand that there were some decisions made by Te Tumuaki o Ngā Reo at previous hui whakapumau that Ngā Reo would sit outside of the Hahi. Right now we are seeing memberships of committee of Ngā Reo within committee Hahi Matua. So to our understanding, that doesn't make sense. We also come here as a takiwa to reaffirm our support on the decisions that were made at previous hui whakapumau to elect members from Ngā Poa Te Whā to be part of committee Hahi Matua, possibly suggesting that because we've got 14 takiwa here, we might be able to agree on some dates and potential venues to host hui whakapumau. So, ai, e tino iho mai tō tātou takiwa, e roti te mana ki tango iho ngā mano, ko te māngai e tōtuku mai ai nea.
We're going to move to the part now of summarising this and formulating some decisions and possible actions to come out of this. If it is your desire to hold a hui whakapumau in 2020, call it today. But I'll just make that clear to you here from Te Omeka Hui. So we should do that. We can put that on the table and address that matter now. There's only one other key issue. Everybody then, what I'm hearing, everybody understands the role and function of hui whakapumau. Now let me give you an example. Is it the ultimate authority of decision making? And why I question that is because in the last 2 years there's been a tension between hui whakapumau being able to make a decision here and then being told that now the tūmaki needs to. So what is that relationship? What is the actual authority of hui whakapumau? Other than that, I think it's very clear the relationship between hui whakapumau and committee matua te haere. The problem that we're having is that once hui whakapumau is there and without any monitoring, your decisions that are made are not getting followed through.
There was no tūmoki before the first hinota.
Yep, correct.
Didn't exist. The synod had to sit first to create the tūranga tūmoki. So if people are asking me, where does the tūmoki sit? Under the whakapumau.
Correct.
Not above it. Whakapumau was the body that instituted that tūranga, and it's on all the minutes, so people can check it. The māngai, that's another issue. But no one's asking me whether the māngai is above the whakapumau, because it's clear the māngai is. We, like Akarana ki te tonga, support the view that the whakapumau is the supreme governing body. There is nothing above it. Not even the Registrar General in Wellington is above the whakapū. So if we want to be really clear, Akarana will move in that direction as a motion to resolve the position of the whakapumo, the position of the tūmoki, and there is no position of the Komiti Hāhi Matua. The Komiti Hāhi Matua is only the management group, and so they're not even in this discussion yet. This discussion is only about governance, and it is whakapumo, and we'll move in that direction, that they are the supreme government body.
So we've got a motion that's worded.
So how you said it, Omeka Hui Whakapumo is the supreme governing body of this hāhi e movement. That's your motion? Aye.
Any seconders?
Ka te rā tūtunu te reo whakamoi ki ki ngā wāka tōka ta mānga e tautoko mai ai e nā kene ia. We have mentioned earlier on the 1994 review by the then Tūmaki Rani the Te Ao Raha, and his attempt to straighten the organisation up. And it compounded the free hui that we had over this matter to the point where he withdrew his proposal because the Mōrehus weren't ready. I think one of the major findings of that review, after extensive consultation with Mōrehu right around the country, that the definition or the purpose of Hui Whakapumo was the supreme policy body of the hāhis that governed all the decisions. And the role of the tūmoki was to preside over Hui Whakapumo from within Hui Whakapumo, not from his house. And the outcomes of the discussions, and either he agreed or he didn't agree, but it was done there. We have a different situation now. It's actually done from elsewhere. That is the motion, but the amendment that's been put on the table, I agree, there needs to be a reaffirmation of the role of Hui Whakapumo and the role of the tūmoki as he presides, in his role as the president, or as he presides over Hui Whakapumo. The role of the Komiti Matua and all those subcommittees is to carry out the decisions. Bueno, koe renga kōrero mō tēnei wā. So I tautoko the motion, the amendment, and anything else that I see that you may want to add in there. No leira nā runga te mihi atu nei ki a tātou katoa, mānga e tautoko mai ai nei ake nei ai.
Got a motion on the table. Over and a second. Yep.
Sounds like now, the whole motion.
Hui Whakapumo is the supreme governing body of te hāhi rā.
That was in the, okay, kapa.
We do another motion, we just keep it nice and tidy like that.
Somebody else speaking to the motion?
Ai tautoko ana mata I te mōtini.
Kia ora. This is a good opportunity for us to set things up so they can work and be effective. Because we just come out of lockdown. The world is not going to be the same, it's going to be very different. And also into the political arena that needs to be established yet for Te Omeka. That deals with the political arena to fulfill the Tiriti o Waitangi, the Mana Motuhake, which is truly the kaupapa of Te Omeka. And that's why once the spiritual aspect has been taken care of through the Komiti Matua Tahai, then it is also legitimate, the decisions that you make from here, to go forward with the support of here and who's on Zoom. It wasn't functioning satisfactory in the past. Why do we want to still continue it? If you want to look in a new direction and want to be effective, let us start now. You don't have to change any aspect whatsoever. The ture wairu and ture tangata will be still there. Unlike the kaupapa o te arapa. Kia ora tātou.
Ki mi ora pene, and a potoro rihita from Rotorua Pāriha. We have set as a Pāriha, we've also set as a takiwa, we've even set as a koata or hamwera. Our main concern was
based from the painu that came out from the pā about the new members of Committee Hai Matua. Our whakaaro was basically to wipe that committee and revert it back to the last statements made by Hui Whakapuma. The kōrero whamaruia sort of sets off a lot of alarm bells. The history, if we start making rules now, are we going to be on track with the first Hui Whakapuma in Kotesh, with the last covenant of the dad? Our view has always been about trying to separate the Turi Wairua Mahi from the Turi Tangata. And I think in the past we've always sort of merged the areas and the black and white becoming grey. Is that Opu Hui Tapu? That's another group there, and there's the other Opu Hui Topu. Me just trying to think out a way of moving forward. It hasn't worked down at Ratana Pā. I tautoko ngā kōrero, we put in remits, mandates come out of Hui Whakapuma, but a lot of them are not actioned. If that's the reasoning why a lot of our mandates are not carried on or carried through, well then maybe we need a rōpū takawain or something to go in between to make sure these mandates are actioned and there's some sort of a record of how they're developing, and then report back to Hui Whakapuma each year. All mandates, I believe, should be archived into a system or adopted into the kaupapa mahi to show the progress of how our people have been thinking and how they want to move into the future. It's very confusing the way it's going now, but everything in my view needs to be restructured so that things work properly, they're accountable, and our people that travel the mileage actually see some benefit as to the mahi and the cost they have succumbed to attending these huis. This place here has to have a role in the future structure. If things are not working properly at Arepapa and you fellas seem to have pulled this hui together, well then something is clicking right with a structure that should be placed here at Omeka Hui. That the dad had set up a tūmoki tūranga and a perehitini tūranga. So maybe we can look at that too. Angai tautoko mai, anya ki iai.
We're going to come back to the motion.
Hai tēnā no kai te katoa. First, I would like to acknowledge what Matua Hahi's raised, and I think it's a very important point that he's raising, because he's talking about organisation and structure, and whether or not we're assigning these roles in the right way.
4 to 5 years prior to the first synod, the synod wasn't used to set up the māramatanga. So I don't want people to get confused with the māramatanga and the hahi. The māramatanga precedes it. Right? So we should never put anything above te waro o noima. There is nothing higher than the wairua tapu. Te tatunga mai a te wairua tapu ki te mato te whenua. But we're not talking about that. I want everybody to leave that over there, kei te pai. That's the māramatanga. We're talking here about the church. And we need to be careful, because you find that we had set up a church. The dad gets home from overseas and unregisters it because he's angry at us. So he calls the first synod for us to discuss about the formalisation of a church. And so what we're talking about, whānau, is this is ture tangata. We all know the reasons why we had a church. There was too many hahi looking at our mori. You know, do we follow that church? Do we follow this church? Do we follow that church? And the dad just said, oh, can't splinter my moru all over the place. So that's the kotahitanga that Te Awana is talking about. To bring all the moru back together. You know, imagine, whānau, what would happen with us all now, but the Wairua Tapu told our founder not to set up a church. We all know that to be true. That's an unquestionable statement by the Wairua Tapu to our founder not to set up a church, not to make fences, come to break fences down, not make a new one. But it was the cry of the moru that first synod was held. And if we're talking about the supreme body, it's the one that governs the church. Don't get that mixed up with the kupu of the Wairua Tapu, with the mahi of the Māngai, even with the mahi of Piriwiri Tua. That's a different take again. We're gathered here because our parent body and our governance body are making decisions which are not consistent with the view of the Moruhu, of the Takiwas and the parishes that are gathered here today. And all we want to know is that we have one governing body supreme over us, and we all need to agree that kotahitanga are one body, a body that governs the hahi.
So let's finalise this, we move to the vote. Complete the resolution. It is your resolution. Te hahi rātana, is it? And we've heard and acknowledged all of the feedback that's come forward. We now move into vote. The motion's been moved by Akarana, seconded by Waiariki. Hui Whakapumo is the supreme governing body of Te Hahi Rātana. Akarana Tamaki Makaurau, seconded. Waiariki. Whea plenty. Koutou I tautukungia tēnei mōtini ki mai ai. Ai. Koutou I whakahe. They all tautoko on the silver. Ai. Karutu. That's done. That motion is moved. Kia ora tātou. As a follow-on through that, the next motion we used to consider, are we to hold a hui whakapumo this year and when? Can somebody formulate a motion? Suggestion has come off to the weekend of the 1 o Noema, so that's to be considered. Hea hui mia.
Nā wai te hea mana. Hari ane e kōna ko tahine te whakaaro. I roti te mōtini e, ko te hui whakapumo, te mana o tātou o tō tātou hahi. I'm excited and I'm pleased to hear that there's a consensus that the hui whakapumo is the supreme body. What I would like to recommend and suggest is that with the consensus that we've made here today, that a kawenata and a letter be drawn up, that it be sent to Kumiti Matua Te Hahi, that there is a consensus of this hui, that hui whakapumo remains the supreme body. I would like to make a recommendation. A kawenata and a letter be sent to the Kumiti Matua and the Kumiti Hahi, and that representative or body or representative, namely the runanga who are here or appointed, go and present that letter to Kumiti Matua Te Hahi from the consensus of here. Last final comment is that, Jenny, I think that your valid point, I would like to also seek in the future that we make historical presentations so that everybody can make informed decisions. But that's another matter. I put that recommendation forward.
Akarana Tamaki Makaurau makes that motion. Second, please. Whea plenty. All in agreement say aye. Aye. Any objections? How's that on the Zui? Did you fellas hear that? So that's just a supplementary motion added to the first one, that a kawenata, a letter be added with the first motion to complete that. Kampai. Aye. Right, done. Now, hui whakapumo, date.
Can I suggest Labour weekend? I think it'll most probably be the 24th, 25th, and holiday Monday, 26th.
Labour weekend. So currently we have two dates. We had one from Zui, the weekend of the 1 o Noema. That was from Te Waipounamu, Omeka Hui, and now Pumi has put up the Labour weekend. So the resolution, and we're going to call for a mover, is that this hui has confirmed today its desire to convene its hui whakapumo on the weekend of 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th. So this will be signalled to the path through a letter. In there, the request is to convene that at Rāpana Park. If there is no willingness to convene it at Rāpana Park, the hui will be held here.
Labour Wiki. We're in this position because we have allowed too much leeway for Komiti Hāhi Matua to decide. So we go there and we say, a resolution has been made to hold hui whakapumo on this date at Te Pāo Ngāriki.
Form the resolution. Are you happy to move the resolution? We will be indicating to the pā that hui whakapumo from out of this hui, we have strong desire to hold hui whakapumo on these dates at Rātana Pā. No one's moved it though. I had just put that up. Move? Seconder? Yeah. Aye. Okay, that's the motion. Mover, seconder. So the desire from out of this hui is that hui whakapumo be convened this year, Labour Weekend, 24th, 25th to the 26th of October, 2020 at Rātana Pā. Move, Manawa Tū, seconded, Whananapu Whananui. All in agreement, say aye. Aye. Any objections? Any input on there? Carried. Kia ora.
Ultimately, Komiti Matua is a national executive that should implement what hui whakapumo says. Kia ora.
Move some motion. Pei au koe Te Wana. Lay your motion for us, please.
Hi, tēnā koutou. My motion is that the current committee, Komiti Matua Te Hāhi, is stood down and a new committee is appointed. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora.
Seconder to that motion. Another takiwa prepared to second that motion. Akarana ki te tonga have seconded that motion. Now,
The hui whakapumo can, at the hui whakapumo hui, stand up and say, we the hui whakapumo appoint members from each takiwa around the country. And that each takiwa puts a representative forward, and that's something that you and I can consider between now and Labour Weekend. There are very capable people in this room and also through the network throughout the Morehu. Did you know that the dad in the earlier years only had 7 members called the Tokowhitu because he made up of those from out the regions? But I just wanted to say here, Te Wana, I'd like to make an amendment, if possible, to your motion. Now that the motion has been passed, I would like to suggest that a working committee be formed. Te Wana, you have the capacity and the means to be able to coordinate. You have all the networks throughout the takiwa. I take on board what Manawatu has said. Added to that, I think everybody, given the motion, you are free to go back to your takiwa and discuss with your takiwa at the level with your morehu. I want to suggest that whether a motion is needed or not, that a working committee be set in place to be able to coordinate with the takiwa, because it won't be done in the pā. With the workings of the committee, they can work through the details about how that might be coordinated through the takiwa and some guidance as regards to the appointee, etc. And that the details be left to that working committee until such time then they can notify each takiwa with consultation with the takiwa as to how best to move forward.
I agree with what Hui is suggesting, that a working committee be put in place in order that we get some smooth transition into the hui whakapumo set up for October, but also that the nomination process is handled really well and clean. So I'm going to move a motion that we set up a working committee for that specific purpose only, to handle the process of getting together, or the selection process, the nomination process for a new committee, Hui Whakapumo 2020 October. So that motion may not be full enough, but at least it gets us talking on, if we can get something like that happening, I think that would work in our favour.
let's put that motion on the table, that that motion's moved, and it should be followed up by who goes on there. Moved by Tai Pukero Te Waiwanui, seconder to that motion. This is to formulate a working party. They have plenty. Okay, let's move it. Let's go for it. All in agreement, say aye. Aye. Any objections? Still the same over there. Full consensus. Full consensus. Kia ora tātou. Ka pai? Done?
Excellent.
Okay, let's call for nominations into this working party. We'll first call and see those that might wish to put their hands up to be considered on that. Are there any in this room?
Aye.
Penji Tiwana?
Aye.
Kapai Tiwana? Pita? You happy to go on there? We've got someone. Kia ora, Pita? Kia ora. You asked who are going to come on there, especially for short term, because you declare your commitment and then we get on with it. Joseph?
Charisma Rapana.
Charisma Rapana, Kapai.
Veronica Thompson.
Kapai, Ronnie?
Aye. Tijuana, Lita, Kiniora, Josie, Charisma, Veronica.
It's 6. Great start. Kapai?
Ka pai e te hea mana, tautoko nei ngā ingoa, whakahinga te ake nei. I'd like to also offer Arahi myself and Kereama as advisors.
We'll seek a mover outside of that look through. If we have a mover, we've heard our team. I think it was a team of 6. We've also included in there 3 advisors. Kura, second up. All in agreement, say aye. Any objections? Another consensus, mate. Right, done.
I know that we've got a motion on the board.
Let this gathering acknowledge Te Omeka Marae, Te Ture Tangata Marae of Te Hāhi Rātana.
But in regards to the motion that Rodney's put up, ka pai. So what I want to make very clear is that at Hui Whakapumo this year, East Te Omeka Pā will present. We'll ask to have that on the agenda. Because the Supreme Governing Body is here today, as long as we allow that on the agenda, of course we will do. Secondly, Ruia, Arihi, Kereama, yes, we will accept your brother's help. Ranaru here chairing this part, the motion that Ronnie's left here, that this gathering acknowledge Te Omeka Pā, Ture Tangata Marae o Te Hāhi Rātana, moved by Korneke. Is there a second there? Taranaki, Tanganui. All in agreement say aye. Aye. Any objections? Zui? Are these all ayes? Are there any objections? Okay, done. That's the follow-up actions as I've just explained. We're accepting what's been laid on the table by Ruia. And I then expect that because this is the governing body, you'll allow our presentation to be part of that agenda for this year, Hui Whakapumo 2020. We'll take care of things there. Time is getting on. We're just going to start now wrapping up all these follow-up actions so we're all clear. Each take today has a kawenata.
Overall kawenata covers all of the aspects that we talked about today.
I think that would be great. Remember to have that completed today. So Rui is now prepared to present kawenata for the whole day to cover all kaupapa, and then we'll seek to endorse them. Kia koe, Ruia.
But I suggest that te hea mana that you just briefly go through of the actions that we've decided on and taken, and then I'll read the kawenata.
We reinforce today that Hui Whakapumo is the supreme governing body. We also confirmed that our Hui will be Labour Weekend this year, Hui Whakapumo 2020. There'll be a pānui prepared, and our runanga have accepted the responsibility of carrying it on our behalf, and any of our other pau that wish to take that back to Rātana. We also had adopted that the kawanata be framed up, but we're going to hear the kawanata for the day. Komiti Matua, we very clearly moved into a direction that our recommendation as we whakapumo this year, our collective recommendation will be to stand down Komiti Matua. From out of that take, we then formulated the working parties, and we understand the role of that working party. Take number 3, Tumaki-tanga, we have moved the resolution to now seek retirement for all the right reasons. To give relief to Harerangi, to honour Harerangi, all those right reasons to seek his retirement. And again, the working party has been adopted. The same working party will be leading those two kaupapa. And then kaupapa number 4, we've heard the resolution, I don't need to read that out. Ronnie, Omeka has agreed, and we asked for space on this year's Hui Whakapumo 2020 to present a comprehensive presentation of where we think the actions going forward with our role. Those are the take and the kawanata that will be presented as to cover all of that mahi's done in the next today.
Tēnā tātou. Oi no i tunu ala kia tātou no homa e tunu nei. Ane te kawanata, pēnā e pai kia koutou, tēnei pō, ai muri o koutou wehe ngātu, ki o koutou kāinga. Tēnei ka printer tēnei me haina koutou, pēnā e whakaia na koutou. Ka tonga wairua tapu ane ponu me te māngai, are pō me ka piriwitu hāme na māngai ai. Ka wenata whakau i te mana tūturu a te hui whakapūmau i raro i te korori e tango i hō ngā mano. Rua te kau ngā whitu, hune, rua te kau. Te Omeka pā, te aroha, matamata. E te māngai, e ngāne hele pono e te tokotoru tapu. Hei wainga nui koutou i a mātou, ngā pōtoro runanga, ngā pōtoro takiwā, o tiranga pau o te hāhi, me ngā mōrehu tēnei ko te whakahui nei. Ki rungo o te mānia o matamata i tō marae o te Omeka pā. Hei tatari i ngā kupu katoa, o roto o tēnei kawenata, ka takotoa tu nei ki mua i a koutou. O tira me mātua tāpairi pene tātu nei i o mātou tini ngoikoretanga. Me ngā tini he o mātou ngātou, tinana, wairua no hoki. E riro atu ai mga koutou ane hera pono e tango atu ki te wāhi. Ko ni te mai a koutou no ngā mea pēra. Horo ia arunga, araro aroto awaho o mātou. Hei mea e tū wāte anō e mātou. E karangatonu te ai mātou e pono ngaro hano koutou. Ai kia rite ai ki te kukupā te harakore. Mā atu i te hukare. Wai hoki, tēnei kanohiringi te ngā kauri pene tā. Kia whānau haurawa. Mātou katoa iro te tika me te pono. Mā wano ki e te māngai hei tautoko mai, ai e nei, ake nei ai. E i hoa e ngā riki mea koutou ane hera pono. Oro moi honei koutou i te tika me te pono tēnei reo tāwhai i pene tāno reira pa tūwa tēnei anō mātou. E te āhei ki te tuku atu i o mātou reo whakamoimeti whakakroria. Whakawhetai mo ngā tini mana ki tana katoa. Ko whiwhi nei mātou mai ngā ki muri taino mai ki tēnei rā. Arā, ko te taro o te hāhi. Ko piki te marama, piki te ora, piki te kaha, me te tau o te rangi mārie. Mau anora, te mānga e tautokotonu mai ai e nei ake nei. Ai. E ngā riki, tēnei rā te tangi whakaiti, mātou rā. Me te inoi atu, kia koutou, kia awhina nui tia mai, kia ratakina mai mātou, kia manaki tia mātou o tēnei hui. Ki te whakatipa, ki te whakatikāke, me te hāpai ake anō. I nā hoki ko te hui whakapūmau, ko te komiti matua o te hāhi me te tumuaki, ngā take i tēnei rā. Tēnei mātou o tēnei hui, te whakaū nei. Āreo i te mana, āreo ākawenata i te mana o te hui whakapūmau, i te korori tango i ho ngā mano, i tīmatari ai i runga o kaikohe, Kahi mano e iwana ua te kaumāwaru. Wai hoki e whakai ka hana mātou. Kei te hui whakapūmau tonu te mana tūturu o te hāhiratana. Uwhia mai a ho te manakitanga ki runga ki ngā ringa waiwai. O tira ngā komiti ko tū i tēnei rā. Hei whakatutuki i ngā tūmanako i tue ake i tēnei hui o mātou. E te matua tamo wairua tapu me ngā mehera pono, ārepa Omeka piripiri tuahamua. Tohungia mai mātou, hei mea e tupu ka hānoai, e whai huai te hāhiratana me te ture tangata. Hei painga mo ngā uri whakatupu, me ngā mōrehu katoa puta noa o Aotearoa. Wai pauna mo whitea tiki whare kauri a puta noa i te ao katoa. O kira māu e te māngai pono, hei tautoko mai tēnei kupu i tēnei ka wengata, aia nei, ake nei, a. Ko ia ko mātou i ngoa e mau i raro ake nei. Ka tia ke tēnei ka wengata, o pānui te aku nei, pēnei e paiana, e whakaiana rā tātou, i tēnei ka wengata, a mātou anō e haina. Ka tia ke te hea mana, tēnei ka wengata, o takota tēnei ki mua ki tēnei hui hui. Tēnā tātou katoa, pānei tautoko ai.
Mara matanga